Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Mark Whiting has just snuck through the door while I was pressing buttons elsewhere. Morning, Mark. How are you doing, my friend? Good of you to join us. I know Gary Muirhead was here early doors, so we'll come to this, but he says, good morning, guys. Good morning, Mark Anthony. Public enemy number one. I think that's probably exaggerating things, but as you will learn in the not too distant future, yeah, there's another party that I'm not going to be invited to. It does make me laugh. Yeah, the countdown is now on. We've including this show, we've got 5 until I've got the best part of 2 weeks off. I'm off to Las Vegas on not this Saturday, Saturday after, and I'll be there for a week and a half or thereabouts. So yeah, make the most of this show while you can. Don't know when to do. I'll probably do it as a news item, although I'm very conscious of the fact that the news should be about other people, not about the people actually broadcasting the news. But in this instance, I've kind of had that power taken out of my hands. So I tell you what, without further ado, let's roll the intro, and I'll tell you what's going to be on the show, and then we'll get into the reason that I'm chuckling. Let's have this. It is Friday, the 20th of February. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, which is when I normally press a button, isn't it? There we are. The Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming, the authentic voice and sometimes unpopular voice of the global demolition industry. In today's show, 5 out, 2 in. I promise that will make sense in just a moment. Selling JCB wheel loaders to the Americans. Bobcat's window onto the future, and our MB Crusher sponsored Countdown to ConExpo series continues with a company called Dosco. I don't know Dosco, but I'll be showing you their wares a little bit later on. Plus, in today's edition of Mark's Morning Monologue, Skeleton Crew, the demolition and construction industry's rapidly diminishing workforce. Pop over to the chat. Gary Muirhead says it'll be interesting at the IDE meeting next week. Yeah. Interesting or quite short. I really don't know how that's all going to pan out. But I tell you what, let's deal with one spat at a time, shall we? Let me do this. Right. If you were here yesterday, you will know that our morning monologue was called Digitizing Competence. And I was talking about the fact that high fidelity simulators like those from CM Labs, who we featured the night before on our After Dark show, were a possible fix for the various shortcomings within our current card scheme system. I mentioned the fact that the police had raided what I described as a CSCS training center wrongly, as it turns out. I'll put my hand up. It wasn't a CSCS training center because there is no such thing, as I've been advised. There are training centers that deliver CSCS training, but they are not CSCS training. I know, semantics. Anyway, I don't know why they've just picked this one particular broadcast, because I'm fairly outspoken about my personal concerns over the card scheme in the UK, and not just CSCS, but NOCM, CCDOs, all of them. But apparently, I triggered the fine folks at CSCS yesterday. Now, bearing in mind, I've been back and read what I wrote on that. Digitizing competence, and a lot of it was very sort of pro simulator and everything else. There's possibly 2.5 paragraphs that are dedicated to my concerns over CSCS and the other card providers. I had a response from CSCS that ran to about 1,000 words. So they've responded to me and my 150 words with 1,000 words, kind of telling me the error of my ways. I mean, I could have read it to you, but I thought that sounds a bit dull, so I've turned it into a video. Yeah, sit back for the next 4 minutes and 17 seconds. This is the fine folks of CSCS setting me straight.
CSCS is writing to request several amendments to your article Digitising Competence, 19th February 2026, and to provide clarification and additional context that we believe will be helpful to your readers. 1. Card schemes and proof of competence. The article suggests that obtaining a card is simply proof that someone passed a test on one specific day. This is not an accurate reflection of how CSCS Alliance card schemes operate. All 37 card schemes displaying the CSCS logo, representing 2.3 million cards, require individuals to have achieved or be formally working towards a recognized qualification for their occupation, in addition to passing the relevant health and safety test. These schemes operate in line with standards set by the Construction Leadership Council and adopted across industry. Cards therefore provide verification that the holder has achieved the recognized qualification and associated training for their occupation, key components of competence. It is also important to be clear that cards are not presented as a blanket guarantee of full, role-specific competence in every possible workplace scenario. They are one control within a wider competence management system. However, they do provide assurance that individuals have met the agreed industry baseline of training and qualifications for their role. 2. Reference to a CSCS training center. The article refers to a police raid at a CSCS training center. This risks creating a misleading impression. CSCS is a card scheme. It does not operate training centers, deliver training, or develop qualifications. There is no such entity as a CSCS training center. Training and qualifications are delivered by awarding organizations and their networks of approved training providers. These organizations operate independently of CSCS. CSCS's role is to verify that an individual has achieved the necessary qualifications and training as defined by industry standards, not to deliver or oversee that training. We would appreciate this reference being amended to accurately reflect the distinction and avoid confusion about CSCS's role. 3. Fraud, scale, and safeguards. Fraud is taken extremely seriously. When CSCS is alerted to confirmed fraudulent activity linked to a test center, we revoke any affected cards. Revoked cards are flagged within our card checking platform, CSCS Smart Check, which also identifies counterfeit cards. This is why we strongly encourage all employers to check cards electronically on site using CSCS Smart Check. While fraud is an important issue, it is also important that its scale and the safeguards in place are accurately represented. 4. Social media adverts offering cards without qualifications. We share your concern regarding social media and black market adverts offering cards without qualifications. Our fraud prevention team regularly works to have such adverts removed and advises industry to use official routes only. For clarity, CSCS does not advertise on social media. Any advert offering a CSCS card without the required qualification is a scam. We consistently advise industry to use official routes for training and qualifications and verify cards digitally using CSCS Smart Check. 5. Building safety regulator and routes to competence. Finally, it may be helpful for readers to understand that the wider competence framework is evolving rapidly. Significant work is underway across industry, including engagement with the building safety regulator to establish clearer role definitions, evidence requirements, and more robust competence management frameworks. Cards sit within that broader system. They are not presented as a standalone competence solution. CSCS is working with sector-specific groups to ensure cards reflect evolving industry-defined standards as those requirements are finalized. We would welcome the opportunity to discuss these points further and would appreciate amendments that more accurately reflect the role of CSCS and the wider industry context. Kind regards, CSCS.
Right. First and foremost, I have amended that CSCS training centre. If those aren't a thing, it was a training centre that offers CSCS, but it's not a CSCS training centre. Excuse me. So I have amended that. I have also invited CSCS to come onto the show and to talk about all of those things in person. I've not had a response to that part, which is not particularly surprising. But the rest of it, I'm going to go over to Gary Muirhead, who says it's a lot like an MOT for your car. It's only good for the day it was formed. Yeah. It's also like a CRB check. I don't know what they're called these days, but a CRB check says that you're okay to be around children. You get your card today, or your certificate that says you've been checked, your background's been checked, you're not a risk to children. And then you shag a child. But that CRB check still says that you are okay to be around children. Now, I'm not comparing child rape with CSCS cards, but far from it. But, the same rules apply. So much in that kind of made me scratch my head. One of them, and I realise this is one of the weird things to be pointing out, CSCS does not advertise on social media. So where does it advertise? And if it's not advertising on social media, how in God's name is it hoping to attract the next generation of plant operators who, as far as I can see, spend most of their time on social media? Where are they advertising? Farmers Weekly? Hairdressers Journal? Cage and Aviary Birds? These are all magazines that I used to work next door to, but you get the idea. Where are they advertising their wares? The other thing that I think that failed to address was the notion of CSCS. As far as I'm concerned, it's sold as a competence card. We all know it isn't, and they go to great lengths to talk about the fact that it's merely a component of competence. Is that how they're sold? I don't believe that's the case. And as I said yesterday, yes, there might be background to it, but somebody passes a test, they get a CSCS card, and that's what they go forward with. So, as I say, I changed the CSCS training centre part. I stand by everything else. What I have done over on Demolition Insider, I've actually put that video at the end of the article. So I'll let everybody that's reading it make up their own mind. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not bowing. I'm not bowing at all. I shall fight my corner. But that's another organisation that is unlikely to invite me to their Christmas party. I'm not going to the NFDC one. I think that's fairly clear. I don't think I'll be going to CSCS. Unlikely to be going one with Finning. And the list grows. Do these people not know what I do for a living? I wonder. I'm a journalist. This is what journalists do. Yeah. I realise that probably comes as a terrible shock to some people, but this is what we do. Or this is what I do and what some used to do. Yeah. Dan says, well, guess what, Mark? Go on. Knock me out. Knock me over with a feather, would you? While he's typing, I tell you what, while he's typing the answer to whatever the question was, let's do this. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you. He says, we've got your back on it. Well, listen, I realise I shouldn't say this in public, but I kind of rely on that anyway. I kind of assume that I am speaking for us all. But thank you for that, Dan. Very much appreciated. very quickly, I'm planning to write something on this, probably for early next week. Whether or not you lot ever get to see it, because I should probably do it somewhere else. But I've been invited to a press conference this morning at ConExpo. In actual fact, since just before Christmas, I've been invited to press conferences almost daily for ConExpo. And I don't know why, but I sat down and did the maths this morning. ConExpo will play host to more than 2,000 exhibitors. 2,000, okay? They're spread over a couple of halls and a couple of different parking lots that run best part of 3 miles, kind of the length of the Las Vegas Strip. So, I did the maths. If I genuinely wanted to and could physically do so, if I wanted to see every single exhibitor at the show, and this is assuming that there's 2,000, there's actually more than that, but assuming there's 2,000, I could dedicate 68.4 seconds to each exhibitor. Now, that doesn't take into account traveling from one exhibitor to another. Now, in some instances, I'll be going from here to here because they're next door to each other. But in other instances, I've got to take a taxi 2.5 miles up the road. Okay? 68.4 seconds. And I must have had 60, 70 or more invites to press conferences, death by PowerPoint, that last about an hour. So they are taking up something like 100 times the amount of time I've actually got to get around the show. I've said no to all of them, just so you know. I may get back to that. Crystal says, we're all guilty by association. Then I thought you knew that. I mean, I should probably have a disclaimer as the show starts, but yes, that's more or less the case. You must have hit a nerve mark, otherwise you wouldn't have got a response. Kind of goes back to something that Gary said. I mean, I don't particularly want to go around upsetting people, but it does show that. It shows this platform reaches parts other platforms don't. Yeah. And I think it also highlights the fact that others aren't talking about this sort of stuff, which we are. And I think that's why perhaps the CSCS folks have gone completely over the top with their response. They could have phoned me up and said, "You know, you've said that wrong. All right, okay, I'll correct it. I've got a thick skin. I'm man enough. I'll correct that. Not a problem at all." But they didn't. 1,000 odd words just to write a few paragraphs. You are 100% correct. Well, CSCS training centres notwithstanding, yes, I believe I am correct. We've got a worrying one for you now. In fact, I watched it. I had a morning monologue written and ready for this morning, and then I watched this morning, and I thought, nope, that's way more important. So what I'm about to show you is a video featuring a guy called Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe is TV radio personality from the States. He's often on the Caterpillar stand at ConExpo. He has a podcast, or he used to have a podcast, which I absolutely loved, called That's the Way I Heard It. He's got a perfect voice for radio, but he's also a real advocate for blue-collar workers, specifically those working in demolition and construction. Have a listen to this. As I say, I'm going to check back on this for the morning monologue today, but have a listen to this.
For every 5 tradespeople who retire this year, 2 will replace them. 5 out, 2 in. Now, it's been that way for over a decade, and you don't have to be a math major to look at that and go, all right, that ratio is not sustainable. And yet, this industry has borne the brunt of it. The workforce is aging. People are retiring faster than they used to. But we haven't made a persuasive case for the work that the industry does, and therefore the next generation coming up, they're both diminished in terms of the total size, but they haven't been persuaded. Our industry hasn't taken the country by the lapels and shaken it and said, hey, look at the jobs that exist in this company. Look at the opportunity that exists here. Let me introduce you to a couple of my superstars. Caterpillar wouldn't mind me saying this. I've said it to their CEO on more than one occasion. You guys have an opportunity to make a rock star out of any number of employees who have prospered and thrived as the result of mastering a skill that's in demand and then going to work. We need to affirmatively lean into our own success stories, and then we need to tell them proudly, unapologetically, not through the lens of marketing and PR. I don't need another campaign that's been focus grouped and tested, because today, people entering the workforce, this current generation, their bullshit meter is finely tuned. They know when they're being marketed to, whether it's social media or whether it's billboards, outdoor advertising. My answer to your question is collectively, we need to make a more authentic and more persuasive case for the opportunities that exist in the industry. And we have to really lean into it, and we have to get ahead of it, because right now, and look, I know you know this, it's a knife fight in a phone booth to recruit. I was in a data center last month in Plano. I met 3 electricians, all under 30, all making north of 250 grand a year, no debt between them. And here's the craziest thing. All of them had been poached 3 times in the last 18 months from other similar projects. I mean, that's bad news for the industry from a supply and demand standpoint, but from a recruiting message, those guys need to be on billboards. That's what my foundation does. How can I tell that guy's story? And so how can I get a parent or a guidance counselor to pay attention and say, holy crap, man, that guy's making $250,000 a year with no debt, second kid's on the way. He's happy. He's got as much overtime as he wants. Those stories are real. We got to tell them, because at this point, it's not just a question of successful recruiting for this company or that company, or maybe better opportunities for this guy or that woman. You're getting into the world of national security here. You're talking about our infrastructure. Jensen Wang and Larry Fink, I just saw them. They did a thing over in Davos. They're calling what's coming the greatest infrastructure build out in the history of the world. Are we ready for it? Is the construction industry ready for it? The answer is an unqualified no. And the reason has nothing to do with enthusiasm or technology. It's workforce. That's what it is. And we either get ahead of it or we don't.
I am going to add to it, but there's not really much I need to add to that. Very quickly, going to say good morning to Rapid Demolishers over on Instagram. Dan says he's hitting a hot topic. Ain't that the truth? Think about, there was a lot of facts and figures in that, but think about this from purely this show perspective. 5 out, 2 in. And as you'll hear at the end of the show, things are actually worse here in the UK, but 5 out. So imagine we took out Dan, Gary, Ken, Jim, and Chris. Take all of those out, and then we bring in 2 more. Think about the effect that has at site level. Look around yourselves at the moment. I don't know what sites you're on, but if you've got 10, 15, 20 people working in and around the site that you're on, take out 5, replace them with 2, and then think about how much productivity, experience, knowledge, wisdom you have lost in that instant. And as I say, things are worse here in the UK, as you're about to hear at the end of the show. One of the reasons I listen to Mike Rowe's podcast, not for a while, but I used to listen to it almost religiously, is that voice. What a soothing voice. And I'd love to get him to say, you're now watching the Breakfast Show with Mark Anthony, but he would probably charge me $50,000 to do it. And frankly, as much as I love his voice, don't think that's going to happen. Mark Whiting, going back to my my slight disagreement with CSCS, you must have hit a nerve mark, otherwise you wouldn't have got a response. Yeah. I realise that some people believe that I sit here twiddling my thumbs looking for victims. Who shall I target next? Who shall I upset next? I really don't do that. But I do think that, and I blame the media as much as I blame the companies, the organisations, and the individuals. I do think that the way that the media has gone has contributed to that. I'm not going to dwell on it, but you think about a press conference given by your man Trump, and he lies as he breathes, and the press all sit there with their notepads and yeah, okay, I'll take that as a. They don't call him out on it. When he said to one of the female journalists, "Quiet piggy," nobody went, "Hang on a minute, pal, you can't be doing that." No, we just they just keep their head down. I think we've gone along with this notion of if the CITB says a thing, that must be true, or we must print it verbatim. Where is the pushback? What is the point of a media if you don't push back? And how could I sit here in front of you guys and say, everything in the garden is rosy? There's, we've got more people coming into the industry than we know what to do with. We are absolutely, we're inundated with highly skilled people. Our gender balance is fantastic. We're kind to children and small animals. You'd call me out on my bullshit. You absolutely would, and rightly so. Rapid Demolishers are watching from South Africa. We are a South African-based company, but always keen on expanding abroad, especially the UK. What's your thoughts? Rapid Demolishers, I would suggest look elsewhere, at least for now. As a nation, we're not particularly welcoming of overseas companies coming into the UK. I can think of only one or two that have ever done so with any degree of success. But also, the industry is not particularly good at the moment. If you're looking to expand anywhere, look somewhere like Australia or New Zealand, where it's really going all guns blazing at the moment. That would be my answer there. Pity it's dollars, not pounds. Money is a double-edged sword. You're skilled and deserve to be well paid, but big money attracts people that only want the money, not the skill or the work. All true. But I wonder as well, Dan, you probably know the answer to this better than I do because of your WhatsApp groups. He mentioned the notion of staff poaching. And I realise that's kind of an active employer going out and saying to an employee or somebody else, come and join us. But I think also the employees are doing that themselves. They're looking for another £5 a week or whatever it might be. At the moment, I get the impression that is going on a lot. People just hopping off and hopping off and hopping off. What's your thoughts? Do you think we're losing our ability for freedom of speech in this world? Yes, I do. Freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of the press, all of those are, and the thing that annoys me the most, or the thing that frustrates me the most, is that we are being led like lambs to the slaughter. It is possible. You can see. I mean, I'm a tiny cog within a bigger cog within a bigger cog within a wheel. But if you go over to something like Substack, you've got ex-CNN, ex-MSNBC people like Don Lemon, Jim Acosta. Proper journalists. And in order for them to continue being proper journalists, calling out lies, calling out problems, they've had to go independent because their publishing companies or their TV companies will no longer support them. They have taken the knee and listen, have a look. Next time you get a chance, if you've got a copy of a magazine for this industry, we all know who they are, and you have a look through. And they're saying very positive things about manufacturer X, and you go a few pages later and there's an advert from manufacturer X, and you think, I wonder if them paying money for advertising has in any way influenced them saying positive things. Let me tell you, yes, it has, 100%. Alfie, 22,000. Okay. Do you know Hughes and Salvage? I do know Hughes and Salvage. Why, do you ask? I do know Hughes and Salvage. Saw a few things recently, and I'm not going to overcommit to this, but the last couple of things I've seen related to Hughes and Salvage are people leaving there, possibly ahead of redundancy. Alfie says, I work for them. Well, listen, I mean, I think Hughes and Salvage do some damn fine work. And they're one of the few UK demolition companies that has really sort of bitten the bullet and sold their services overseas. Just trying to remember where the last time were they in the Middle East somewhere? I can't remember. Stay away, you'd be better off. I don't think the invite's going to be forthcoming anyway. Ken Hatter is here with clouds and rain and stuff. This is the issue with the industry and self-employed. There's no consequences, as someone can offer you 9 months' work at £26 an hour, so you leave your job at £25 an hour to join them. Very true. Were you late, or was it me? It was you, Ken. By half an hour. I was here. And then 2 weeks in, they say, we no longer need you, and this is the problem. Yeah, absolutely. That's something I always admired about you. Always called a spade a spade. No bullshit. Never been scared to stick your head above the parapet. I mean, listen, I'd love to sit here and say, oh, yes. Yeah, aren't I the bastion of professional journalism? I don't know another way. That's the way I was. That's the way I was trained. You know, imagine being sat in a press conference, and you know you've heard and verified the fact that a company is laying off people, and they say, "Oh, everything in the garden's rosy." You know, our profits are up, our turnover's up. You know, everything's right. Would you honestly sit there and say nothing about the redundancies, or about the downscaling, or about the fact that you've heard rumours of them being in trouble? Of course you wouldn't. That's not what journalism's about. But unfortunately, I say that's exactly what journalism is about now. You'll know by now, I spend quite a lot of time watching American politics and stuff like that. And there's a phrase that the independent media are using about America. You know, when you see ICE shooting their citizens, this is not who we are. I've got some bad news for you, America. That's exactly who you are. And I would say the same about my industry. I would say exactly the same about my industry. You might say, you know, we don't sort of follow the lead of the government or particular organisations, but you bloody do. You absolutely do. Ken says, strange, it was saying you're not live today. What, on Facebook? I can see me. I can see me on Facebook. I don't know what's going on there. They promise the earth and get you out the gate a few weeks later. Yeah, absolutely. Then Dan, you find it's only a week. The bait to get you there. Sometimes it's better to take a lower rate to ensure continuity of work, as it's more long term. The trouble is with all of these things, you don't know, do you? You don't know. Grass always looks greener until you stand on it and realise actually you stood on nothing at all. Perhaps you should take a sabbatical and go and sit in front of Trump during one of his White House speeches. I wouldn't want to be that close. I wouldn't want to be that close because apparently your man's a bit whiffy, for one thing, and I don't know how long I could bite my tongue. I really don't. Now, strange, unless I had a bad signal. Yeah, I don't know. Shall we crack on anyway? Because I've got more to show you. In fact, we're going to be back in a moment. Obviously, off to ConExpo in just over a week's time. JCB won't be there, but I want to show you a thing.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
So we tend to see a lot of advertising and video and marketing out of JCB here in the UK, and it's very English, very British. It's quite downplayed. You know, they're obviously they're very passionate about their equipment and are passionate about their people. And Lord Bamford puts in an appearance from time to time, and he's very, very English and upstanding and British and everything else. But when JCB are selling their wares overseas, particularly in America, they do it slightly differently.
JCB is one of the world's largest privately owned manufacturers of construction, agricultural, and defense equipment, manufacturing over 300 products, including machines for the U.S. military. JCB is currently building our second manufacturing facility in San Antonio, Texas. The JCB 409 is a compact wheel loader with a skid steer hitch for easy attachment switching and a tight turning radius for incredible maneuverability. The JCB 409 comes with a standard bucket capacity of 1.3 cubic yards. The 74 horsepower engine requires no DEF or DPF and provides speeds up to 25 miles per hour. Hydraulic hoses are positioned away from all pinching areas, and the heavy-duty center joint oscillates at 40 degrees. The cab is comfortable and spacious, and designed for all-around visibility. Machine information such as run times and error codes are also easily accessible on the in-cab display. JCB offers LiveLink telematics, ensuring increased uptime. Shop online or visit one of our over 300 dealer locations across North America.
You've heard that expression, two nations divided by a single language. How about that? JCB here is very Pathé News, BBC, very upmarket and posh. Over there, tide is turning circle in the market. Yeah, weird. And yet, as Dan says, it works. I must admit, I quite like it. I think it's a bit too much. Somewhere between the two, maybe. We'll be back in just a moment after this with something that we've shown you before, but man alive, it's come on.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Those of you that have been here for a while might remember that a couple of years ago, I went off to Debris in the Czech Republic to see Bobcat. One of the many things, we played around with remote controls that are like PlayStation controllers. We did all of that. But one of the things that they showed off was something they developed in conjunction with LG, the people that make the TVs and stuff. What it was like a see-through display. So there was a display on the windscreen, but you could see through it. So it could display things like a heads-up display. It could display things like oil pressure and fuel levels and all that. But you could also see through that, see through the screen to which it was affixed, and see people walking past. I tested it, and it worked fine. But at the end of the day, it was an LG screen stuck to a Bobcat screen. And that was a couple of years ago. They've been working on it since then. Pretty smart, right? Particularly enjoyed the soundtrack, I have to say. But yeah, that's come on a long, long way in the last couple of years. Hats off to the fine folks at Bobcat for that. We've got one more film to show you featuring a company called Dosco, about which I know absolutely nothing, but I'm hoping to bump into them over at ConExpo. And speaking of ConExpo, this. Right. Before I go over to Dosco, I just want to say this from Andy. Going back to the Bobcat Scream, can you get Netflix on that? Wouldn't that be a joy? I listen, I realise it's a distraction, but wouldn't that be handy come lunchtime? Yeah. Dosco, yes. Here is Dosco, who are going to be at Con Expo. Dosco, I'm coming your way. Yep, that's what they do. That's what Dosco do. That's about it for the main part of this morning show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue, the final one of this week. And bear in mind, just for next week, won't be here on Friday. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Hope to see you again very soon. I'll be back on Monday. If I don't see you before then, have a good weekend. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I shall return immediately after this. Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently witnessing the slow motion collapse of the UK's ability to build anything at all. For years, the industry has operated on a just-in-time delivery model, not just for bricks and steel, but for human beings as well. We assumed there would always be a steady stream of young lads and lasses eager to join the construction industry, or a ready supply of skilled labour from the continent to help plug the gaps. We were wrong. As of February 2026, the UK construction and demolition sector isn't just facing a shortage, it's facing a demographic hemorrhage that our current sticking plaster policies can't possibly stem. Let's talk numbers. In the US, they talk about 5 out, 2 in. In the UK, the reality is arguably even more grim. Since the twin shocks of Brexit and the pandemic, the UK construction industry workforce has shed over 300,000 workers. We're now sitting at a 25-year low for sector employment. The Construction Industry Training Board says we need roughly 250,000 extra workers by 2029 just to keep the lights on and to meet the government's ambitious housing targets. That's nearly 50,000 new recruits every single year. So what's the intake? In the last cycle, we saw roughly 24,500 apprenticeship starts. On paper, that's half of what we need, but that's only part of the story. Nearly half of those apprentices will drop out before they reach qualified status. We're recruiting 2, losing 5 to retirement or illness, and only actually finishing the training for 1. We're not just running a training deficit, we're bankrupting our future capacity. Over 35% of our current workforce is over the age of 50. These are our masters, our knowledge base. Within the next decade, 750,000 people will walk off sites in the UK for the last time. And when they go, they don't just take their boots and their hard hats. They take decades of tacit knowledge that's not written in any MVQ manual. We're losing the teachers faster than we can find the students. In the demolition sector, it's even more acute. How many 18-year-olds are told by their careers advisors that deconstruction is a viable, high-tech career? I'll tell you, it's almost none. We've rebranded the trades as a last resort for the academically struggling. And now we're surprised that no one wants to join. And it's not just old age taking our people, it's the industry itself. A staggering 76% of tradespeople surveyed this year have considered leaving the sector. And what's the official response? The government pledged roughly £600 million to create 60,000 more workers by 2029. That sounds like a lot until you realise that 60,000 over 5 years is just 12,000 per year. And as a reminder, we need 50,000 per year. The government's plan addresses less than 25% of the actual need. They're promising the public a building revolution, while the army required to fight it is deserting in droves. This should be a wake-up call. If we don't fundamentally change how we value, train, and protect our tradespeople, we're heading for a hard stop in the UK economy. Housing will become a luxury because the labour cost of a bricklayer will surpass the cost of the land. Infrastructure will crumble because we lack the engineers to maintain it. Innovation will stall because you can't 3D print an excavator operator or a demolition engineer. We need more than just funding. We need a cultural pivot. We need to stop treating the trades as a secondary career path. We need to pay apprentices a living wage from day one so they don't leave for a retail job that pays more for less physical risk. We need to invest in the health and longevity of our older workers so they can stay in the game for longer as mentors. The machines are still moving for now, but the seats within them are getting emptier every single day. If we don't act soon, the Great British Building Site will become a silent, empty monument to a country that forgot how to use its hands. Some genuinely worrying figures here. I'll flip back to what Mike Rowe was saying in that ConExpo John Deere video earlier. When you look at the problem of our hemorrhage of workers, it's easy to look at it through the lens of purely construction. If you've got 5 workers on site today, at some point in the future, there might only be 2. That's the basic math. That will make us less productive, and we will be even less able to build what we need to build. But think about it beyond just the industry. One of the key tasks of the construction industry is to build homes. We are as a nation, we are still reproducing. We're still having children. Those children will need homes. Their children's children will need homes, and so on down the line. We won't have that. We won't have the ability to build hospitals and schools. We're a major contributor to the country's GDP. Our economy rides upon on the back of the construction industry. And if the construction industry cannot do what it is required to do because we don't have the people to do it, the nation stalls. Think about it in terms of inward investment. If you're a major, we've been through the Japanese bit. Let's say that the Chinese banking sector has a major surge, and they decide we're going to set up shop in the city of London. We need a headquarters, 50 stories of glass and chrome, and we can't build it. So what do the Chinese do? Well, we'll build it in Paris or Amsterdam, Munich, or somewhere. That's that inward investment gone. And the most worrying part of all of this is, these facts are there. Going back to my slight falling out with CSCS yesterday. I'm not making this shit up. I'm not doing this for artistic effect. I'm not doing it just to fill airtime on a Friday afternoon because I've got bugger all better to do. These are facts. For every 5 people leaving this industry, we're only getting 2 in. And as it turns out, based purely on the apprenticeship end of things, we're 5 out, 2 in, and we're only training 1 of them. How long can that last? How long is that sustainable? And it's also worth remembering that we're not talking about a like-for-like replacement. even if it was 5 out and 5 in, that's still not balancing the books. Because if you take somebody in their 40s, 50s, 60s out, you're taking all of that experience out with them. Even if we were to turn up the tap on apprenticeships and schools and colleges and universities to the point where for every 5 that left, 5 came in, the 5 coming in don't know shit. They've not previously set foot on a construction site or a demolition site. They don't know their way around the equipment. They don't know their way around health and safety. They don't know what's good practice or bad practice. So it's not a like for like. And think about it purely in productivity terms. Let's say, a 50-year-old excavator operator in a 20-tonner is moving 150 tons of material an hour, just off the top of my head. How much is a rookie going to move? 100? 75? 50? A third of what is being produced at the moment? And that will be across the board. We're not talking, obviously, we've got operators in our midst, and we tend to look at that. But this is going to apply on everything. This will be everything from labourers to site managers to engineers. Every single discipline in this industry will be crying out for people. And because we've all sat on our hands as an industry, those people aren't coming. We've done literally nothing to inspire or persuade people to join this industry. If anything, I think we've been complicit in discouraging people. You think back a few years, the number of TV shows that were about cowboy builders and how we all went about stuff. I know in the demolition industry there was quite a few TV shows where, rather than showing the skill of a demolition engineer or an explosive engineer, they showed the inherent risk. If anything, they overplayed the risk. It's implied jeopardy. All this could go wrong at any moment. No, not if it's being done properly. And the people doing the work at the moment are doing it properly. There's very, very skilled people in this industry. And yet, for our 15 minutes of fame, to get ourselves on the TV, lots and lots of construction and demolition companies agreed to be on TV shows that basically showed the nation how dangerous and treacherous and hazardous this industry is. If you're a 13, 14-year-old boy or girl watching that on the sofa with mum and dad, very little in that for you to point out and go, Dad, Mum, that's the career for me. Your mum would have a fit. What, you want to work in demolition? That bloke has just said that building could fall on his head at any moment. I don't think we've caused the problem, but we've certainly been complicit in its creation. What we got over in the chat here, who dat? Jim says, my cousin put a post on the other day. He's a Finning trained fitter and wanting to go into training the next generation as he's getting older and wanting to slow down. I wish we could band those guys together. I really do. But when you think about it, what is to keep people in the industry? I think there will be some that are utterly altruistic who genuinely, I've loved my time in demolition or construction or mining or quarrying so much that I don't want to give it up. I've got enough money in the bank. My mortgage is paid off. I'm okay financially, but I'd still love to give something back. How many of them are allowed to do so? Or are employers saying, well, you've reached 55, you're probably going to start taking a bit more sick time now, you're with your squiffy hip and your dodgy knees and your crook ankle. Yeah, you're going to start. It's a bit like owning a car, isn't it? You own a car for 2, 3, 4 years and it's absolutely fine. And then something goes wrong that costs you 500 quid or 1,000 quid and you think, probably time to chop this in. This is going to start letting me down now. Is that the attitude we're taking with our older generation of operators and operatives and labourers? Call me a cynic, but yeah, I believe that is the case. And just imagine all of that knowledge. Imagine if you charted. Chris will be an example. Chris Ford's been in this industry for a long time. Imagine if Chris had kept a diary of his day on site for his entire career. I don't know how long that is, 30, 35, 40 years maybe. I don't know. But imagine how many volumes that would fill. It would be the Encyclopedia Britannica times 10. You imagine page after page after page after page of insight, of knowledge, of wisdom, of near misses and successful tasks, all of that information. And when Chris finally says, that's it, I'm done, we take all of that knowledge, strike a match, and set fire to it. And for Chris, read 100,000 others. You could fill the British Library with all of the information and knowledge and wisdom between the years of the been there, done that generation. And every single time one of them leaves, they take all of that with them. Now, we do find ourselves, I think, at a crossroads, with the advent of technology and that kind of thing. Maybe telematics will take care of some of that. Maybe, the way that we record digitally these days, maybe we'll be able to capture some of that. But as it stands today, even with the advent of technology, even with NVQs and CSCSs and all the bollocks that goes with it, even if you could cram all of that into somebody's ear at 18 years old, you have not directly replaced a Chris Ford. You've put in a poor substitute. And that's just one example. And I mean, going back to the point I made, and just let me check my figures. I'm sure I said there was, where is it? Yeah. Think about this. Just this one sentence. Over 35% of our current workforce is over the age of 50, which means that within the next decade, i.e. before 2036, 750,000 people will leave. And based on the 5 out and 2 in, what do we get in return? 750,000 gone, we'll get 150,000 people back. 200,000 back. I can't do the maths. I'm going to say bom dia to Wellington Oliveira. I don't know what you're saying to me because you're saying it in Portuguese, which makes me think you're probably either in Portugal, obviously, or you're in Brazil. I don't actually know what you're saying, but good morning to you. Thank you for being here. Bom dia. Yes, back to the chat. What do we have here? This is Dan saying, well put, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Chris says, the only thing I'm finding, Jim, is the older I get, the more I seem to do. A lot of it is chasing around the younger generation as they don't seem to be able to cover the work. Yeah. But I mean, even taking aside the people that you're chasing around, why are you doing more? Is it purely because the people around you are younger and less skilled? Or is it, as we intimated in that morning monologue, the fact that so many people have left that you're no longer just doing the work of one man, you're doing the work of 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3 men? Let me spin back. Yesterday we were talking about simulators and stuff, and we were talking about the notion of one man, not on simulators but on autonomy or remote control, one man operating 2 or 3 or possibly 4 machines at the time. And we're all sat here looking at that going, that's fucking madness. That, that's a recipe for disaster. Aren't we already doing that? How many times, how many times have you seen excavator operator getting off the excavator to jump on the dumper that he's just loaded, to go and dump a load, to come back, park it where it needs to be, jump back in the excavator, and then load it? For dumper, re-dump truck as well. How many times have you seen that? Now, is that because he's power crazed or he likes things done his own way? Or is that because they couldn't find a dumper operator or a dump truck operator? And that's only going to get worse. And just to clarify, Wellington Oliveira is from Brazil. Bom dia to Brazil. Jim says he's in his late 50s, been on the spanner since about 16, so a lot of knowledge to pass on. Yeah, what a terrible waste that would be. What a terrible waste. Dan says, I'll be 50 this year. God, blimey, you're a long way behind me. Looked at my pay slip for working last week, and I had over £900 tax deductions, and you've got to wonder, is it really worth it? Nobody wants to pay tax. Excuse me. Nobody wants to pay tax. But I think we'd all feel a whole lot more chilled if we were paying tax and the country worked. If our roads were more roads than potholes, which they are now. If you could go to your GP, or if you could phone your GP and get an appointment. If you had a hospital bed when you needed one. If your children or your grandchildren had a school space within 2 or 3 miles of where they live. If the trains ran on time. If energy didn't cost a fortune. If we didn't have homeless people sleeping on the streets. If we didn't have young mothers stealing food from supermarkets because they can't afford to feed their children. If we didn't have old people freezing to death because they had to choose between eating and heating, they chose eating, froze to death. I'd pay more tax if all of those things went away. But it does make you wonder if it's worth it. Jim says, I've offered to work for training apprenticeship provider, supply the land to do the training, and still no one was interested. We are that. I did my thing in, I don't know, 1,000 odd words. That there, 2 sentences, that sums up where we are today. Somebody is offering the land to do training, to safeguard the future of the industry. No takers. The industry is marching determinedly towards the edge of a cliff. I mean, I think, to be honest, part of the industry has already stepped off the edge, but we are walking towards the edge of a cliff. And rather than saying, hang on a minute, fellas, slow down, or we need to turn, keep marching forward. Not alone that, Chris. Not bothered. Just did it for the money. Yep. Someone has to feed the benefit system, Gary. True enough. You missed the fuck ups. I have enough of my own, thankfully. Gary says, thanks, Chris. Yeah. So there we are. Listen, we saw yesterday that the CSCS got all uppity about me calling them out. I'd love to think that somebody somewhere in this industry would get equally uppity about the fact that we are hemorrhaging people. It's not just a little trickle. Somebody has severed a fucking artery here, and we are hemorrhaging people. And it's gonna get worse. 700 and we're already looking at a shortfall of 250,000 people. 750,000 people to leave in the next decade. How will we build anything? Anything at all? I said this needs a cultural pivot. It needs somebody, and unfortunately, I think is where my grand plan falls down. It needs somebody in government to say, we've been pushing people towards higher education, college, university, far too quickly and far too often. Let's not forget, teachers, educators, we will always need plumbers, and sparkies and painters and decorators and digger drivers and people to drive a broom around the site. Please, for the love of God, stop trying to make them academics. Stop trying to make the academically struggling into a doctor. It's not going to work. All you're doing is delaying the fucking inevitable. You're going to send them for 3 years at university where they will run up a huge debt, at the end of which they're no use to man the fucking beast. Somebody needs to stand up and say enough. Chris says, I'm trying to pass on what little I know. I've forgotten more than I can remember. To the eldest son, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't force it to drink. It is a two-way street. You know, we've got to have as much pull from the younger generation as we've got push from the older. But if we don't address it soon, there will be no pull or push, because we'll have got rid of all the older people and there'll be no younger people willing to take on that knowledge. You know, we're talking, you know, this is an industry that employs somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million people across all disciplines, across construction, demolition, and all the bits that go with it. We are looking down the barrel of losing 750,000 in a decade. I'm terrible at percentages, but that's something like just shy of a third of our workforce in the next decade is going to hang their harder out, hang up their high vis, walk out the gate, never to be seen again. Almost a third of our workforce. I'm saying this at a time when we're all laughing at the government's ambitious, lunatic plans to build 1.5 million homes. From the day that was announced, everybody in this industry went, yeah, good luck with that. We can't build the required 1.5 million new homes based on our figures today. How many will we be able to build if a third of our workforce is gone in 10 years? We've generally, as an industry, we've generally bumped along somewhere between 175 to 250,000 new homes a year. Take out a third of our workforce. What are we building then? 100,000 at best? So, you know, doing maths very quickly in my head, what Keir Starmer was planning to do in 5 years would actually take us more like 15, if we were lucky. And what happens to all those people that need those homes in the interim? Gary says, here we go now, lads. No, sorry, have to go now, lads. Everyone have a safe, relaxing weekend with your family and see you all on Monday. Yeah, you too, Gary. I hope you're getting home this weekend because I know you were away last weekend. Jim says, you've hit the nail on the head there, Mark. Push them into debt. That's exactly what the government wants. Yeah. Yeah. And what is it now? $9,000 is it $9,000 a year or $9,000 a term at university? I can never remember. Chris, you mean you can lead the calls? You can lead the calls to alter, but you can't make them think. Listen, as somebody that goes by the YouTube handle of Andy Thornton. Well, good. Well done on the play on words. I could get you to write my headlines. I hear you, Chris. My lad is great at work, but not so good if I'm trying to educate him. As I say, we need the push and the pull, and at the moment we have neither. If anybody within the government, listen, I didn't realise that CSCS were watching. If anybody in the government is watching, if anybody at CITB is watching, you are presiding over a disaster in the making. And as far as I can tell, here on the 20th of February 2026, you are doing absolutely nothing to stave off that disaster. And on that cheery note, and on that bombshell, no, on that cheery note, I shall love you and leave you. I hope you have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for all your input and all your time and all your comments and all your stuff. I'll be back here on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you can rest while I go and do something completely different. Till then, everybody, have a fantastic weekend. I'll see you soon. All the best.